Look down at your stomach right now. Somewhere in there is the last thing you ate. In a few hours, it will be gone. Broken apart, absorbed, erased. No record. Nothing left to prove you were ever hungry today. Now imagine that meal surviving for 2,400 years. On the morning of the 8th of May, 1950, two brothers named Viggo and Emil Haggard were cutting peat in a bog outside Silkeborg in central Denmark. It was fuel work. Wet, heavy, boring. Their spades went down through the moss, and something soft stopped the blade. It was a face. Eyes closed, stubble on the chin. A pointed cap of sheepskin and wool, still tied under his jaw with a leather thong. The skin was brown and smooth, like a wallet left out in the sun. They called the police, because they were completely certain they were looking at a man who had been murdered that spring. They were half right. He had been murdered, just not that spring. Radiocarbon dating would eventually place his death somewhere between 405 and 380 BC, which makes him roughly 24 centuries old and gives him one of the most famous faces in archaeology. And sealed inside him, untouched that entire time, was his last meal. Scientists have argued about that meal for 70 years. Because one thing in it is not food. It has no nutritional value, no flavor, no reason to be in a bowl at all. And by the end of this, you'll understand why that one ingredient might be the reason he ended up in the bog with a rope around his neck. Start with why he survived at all. Almost nobody from the European Iron Age did. Millions of people lived and died across northern Europe in those centuries. And nearly all of them are gone completely, down to the last splinter of bone. Bogs are the exception. A raised peat bog is cold, waterlogged, and starved of oxygen, and it's carpeted in sphagnum moss, which floods the water with acid and locks up the nutrients bacteria need to rot a body. So the body doesn't rot, it tans. That's the honest word for it. The man in the Danish bog was not buried and he was not embalmed. He was preserved the way leather is preserved, slowly, by chemistry, in the dark. His skin survived, his hair survived, the stubble on his jaw survived. His fingerprints survived so well that Danish police took a print off his right thumb in 1976, and it came out clean. And his intestines survived, with everything still inside them. He was lying 2.5 meters down, curled on his side in a fetal position, roughly 60 meters out from solid ground. He was naked apart from that cap and a smooth hide belt. Around his neck was a noose of braided animal hide, the knot sitting at the back, drawn tight. He was between 30 and 40 years old, and about 5'3". His eyes were shut and his mouth was almost relaxed. Dead men hanged by the neck do not land like that. Someone climbed out into the wet, arranged his limbs, closed his eyelids, and left him in a position that looks like sleep. But the rope is not the strangest thing about him. The strangest thing is what he had for dinner. In 1950, a Danish botanist named Hans Hellbeck examined the contents of that gut and found a porridge. Grain, seeds, and a startling number of weeds, plants that grow wild in a plowed field, not plants anybody deliberately farms. Dozens of species: barley, flax, gold of pleasure, black bindweed, knotweed, chamomile. That list did something to people's imagination. In 1969, the archaeologist P.V. Glob published a book about the Danish bog bodies that made them world famous, and he read that meal as a ceremony. A special gruel, gathered from the wild, fed to a chosen man before he was given to a goddess of the earth for the fertility of the spring. For 50 years, that was the story, a ritual Last Supper of weeds. Then, in 2019, they opened him up again. A team led by Nina Helt Nielsen, head of research at Museum Silkeborg, went back to the samples with tools Hellbeck never had. Peter Steen Henriksen at the Danish National Museum sorted the plant remains. Molecular biologists at Aarhus University hunted for surviving proteins. Their results were published in the journal Antiquity in 2021, and they are absurdly precise. By weight, the porridge was about 85% barley, 9% pale persicaria, a common weed of grain fields, 5% flax, roughly 335 grams of barley grains, 29 grams of persicaria seeds, 16 grams of flax. 20 other plant species were in there. Together, all 20 came to about 1%. So the ritual salad of wild seeds was never a salad. It was a bowl of barley porridge with two things stirred through it, and a scatter of field weeds that came along for the ride. That's it. That's the sacred meal. Here's where it stops being simple. The proteins gave up something the 1950s analysis had flatly denied. 5 protein fragments in his gut belong only to bony fish. He ate fish. The original conclusion that his final meal was meatless was wrong, and the bog he was thrown into sits beside a lake and running water. The team also found charred crust in his intestines. Burnt porridge, scraped from the bottom of a cooking pot, which tells you the pot was clay, and it was set over a fire by somebody who let it catch a little. and they found algae and seeds from wetland plants, which suggests the water in that pot was carried up from a lake or the bog itself. So reconstruct the evening: a fire, a clay pot, grain that has been ground because the seeds in his gut are crushed rather than whole, water hauled from the lake, barley thickening, flax and persicaria seeds going in, fish beside it. Somebody scrapes the scorched layer off the bottom rather than waste it, and he eats that too. It is a real meal filling, nutritious, enough to cover a serious share of a day's calories. He is not being starved. He is not being given scraps. 12 to 24 hours later, he is hanging from a rope. And there is one more thing in that gut, which is where it gets uncomfortable. Hundreds of parasite eggs, 3 different species, whipworm and mawworm, which spread through human waste getting into food and water, and which tell you exactly what sanitation looked like, where he lived. And tapeworm, reported in a bog body for the first time, which you almost always get by eating raw or undercooked meat. Think about what that combination means. This man was eating a well-made, nutritious dinner, while 3 separate species of worm were living in his intestine. Good food and filthy water at the same table, in the same body. That was normal. That was most of human history. Now, the ingredient that isn't food, mixed into the porridge were things nobody eats on purpose: sand, fragments of charcoal, broken pieces of barley stalk, and husk the chaff and grit that farmers deliberately sieve out and sweep off the floor before they cook. This is threshing waste. It is the dirt left over after grain is cleaned, and it was in the pot. For decades, the assumption was that a sacrificial victim would be given something powerful before dying: a drug, a hallucinogen, something to dull him or lift him out of himself. That idea kept circling around ergot, a fungus that grows on grain and can send a person into convulsions and visions. But when Gruel man, another Danish bog body from around the same era, throat cut, found in 1952, was fully re-examined in 2007, there was nowhere near enough ergot in him to do anything at all. In England, Lindoman had mistletoe pollen in his gut, and it amounted to 4 grains. 4. No drugs, no feast, no poison. Just barley, fish, worms, and swept-up floor dirt. And that, strangely, may be the ritual, because Gruel man's stomach had threshing waste in it too. The 2 most carefully studied last meals in Iron Age Europe both contain the sweepings of a threshing floor mixed in on purpose at the end of a man's life. Nielsen's team is careful about this. They can't yet say whether that was simply how ordinary people ate in the Iron Age, or whether the dust of the harvest was added to the bowl of a man who was about to be handed to the bog. Miranda Aldhouse Green, who has spent a career studying these bodies, has pointed out that in case after case, the meal seems designed to hold a bit of everything from the surrounding land, which means the offering may not have been the man at all. It may have been the whole field poured into him first. And notice what everyone got wrong for 50 years. Scientists went looking for something extraordinary in that stomach: a potion, a sacrament, evidence of a special death. What was actually in there was dinner, barley, fish, a slightly burnt pot, the most ordinary evening imaginable, eaten by a man who had less than a day to live and no idea about it. That's the part that should sit with you. He didn't know. Whatever happened in that bog, the night before it, he was just a person eating porridge near a fire, hosting a tapeworm, scraping the bottom of the pot because food is food. His last meal is famous for one reason only: it never had time to become nothing. You will eat again today. Something forgettable, standing up, half watching a screen. It will be broken down and gone by tomorrow, and no one will ever know what it was. And that is exactly how it should feel. So look down at your stomach right now. The last thing you ate is already disappearing. His has been sitting in a museum in Silkeborg for 70 years, being weighed and photographed and argued over by scientists who will never know his name, and it is still telling them what he had for dinner.